Good morning, First Unitarian Church. It is so nice to see you all. My name is Abbey Tennis. I have the gift and privilege of serving this congregation as your lead minister, and I use she, her pronouns. And it is wonderful to be together today. In particular, happy Advent to anybody who's celebrating Advent. Advent is a word that comes from the Latin adventus, which means arrival or coming. It's a Christian liturgical season where people are awaiting the Messiah or awaiting the miracle. It's a time of hope for liberation, but liberation not yet being here. And it's observed as a time of spiritual preparation and stillness and rest. I love that the liturgical colors for Advent are like purple and dark blue. They're night colors. It's a time where the darkness is still growing before the light begins to return. And it's a time of waiting, not like waiting for the light to change or waiting for the traffic to move forward, but waiting for the seeds to burst up through the land, waiting like pregnancy. A time to let something beautiful grow in the darkness and make preparations around us so that the world has space for this new miracle that's going to arrive. I usually love Advent. I love the juxtaposition of this sort of darkness and spiritual preparation time compared with the way at least most of our culture talks about Christmas, which is that it's like hectic and it's brightly lit and it's all about materialism and cheer. I feel like if Christmas was like a simple buttery sugar cookie, Advent would be like the tart, fragrant clementine. And I love them both, but I like them better together. I like them better when they are in relationship with each other. And yet I'm having a hard time with Advent this year. It's harder to lean into the joys of darkness and waiting right now. I think a lot of it is because we've been waiting for so much. We're about 9 months into this pandemic, and we've been waiting for, well, some of us anyway, have been waiting for connection and touch and company. And some of us have been waiting for a moment of peace, a moment of childcare. Some of us have been waiting for the fear of disease and death to be released for the vaccine. And many of us are just waiting for that moment when we can begin to rebuild that which has crumbled. So much waiting is already happening. And I don't know about you, but I'm spending a lot more time outdoors now than I probably ever have, especially in the winter, because that's the way that we can stay safest right now. It's the way we can stay sanest. It's the way that we can keep our bodies moving. And the less light there is, the harder it is to do that. Advent is hard this year, and many of us just want that simple, sugary butter cookie kind of life. We don't want that tartness of the clementine. So, even in this year, maybe especially in this year, how do we find gifts in this time of waiting? How do we find gifts in this time of spiritual preparation? How do we find gifts in rest? In his book called Sabbath, Wayne Muller writes, "Our willingness to rest depends on what we believe we will find there. At rest," he says, "we come face to face with the essence of life. And if we believe that life is fundamentally good, we will seek out rest as a taste of that goodness. If we believe life is fundamentally bad or flawed, we will be reluctant to quiet ourselves, afraid of meeting the darkness that resides in things and in ourselves." And I think that it was Dumbledore who said something like, "There is nothing to be feared from the darkness. It's the unknown we fear when we look upon darkness, nothing more." But that's still true. There's still often fear there. We fear the unknown. We assign a story to darkness, to unknownness. And sometimes we assign a story of terror, and sometimes we can choose a story of blessing. There's an old joke in Unitarian Universalism that I think is meant mostly to kind of dig at our Unitarian ancestors, but it still says something honest about our theology anyway, which is that neither Unitarians historically nor historic Universalists believed in hell. The Universalists believed that God was so good that God would never condemn humankind to eternal damnation. God was so good that there could not be hell. And the Unitarians said that humankind was so good that God would never condemn us to eternal damnation. We were just too good. I think that all of us have some sort of in between place maybe that we that we locate that goodness now, but it's a still essential part of our theology that there is this essential goodness in the depths of our own souls and in the farthest reaches of the universe that we seek to connect to in our faith here in Unitarian Universalism. And yet, we don't always succeed at connecting to it, right? Particularly in those times where we're most in touch with the pain and the sorrow, where we're in the middle of feeling depth of brokenness, when we're experiencing the ramifications of trauma, it's hardest to feel the goodness in those times. And I think it's particularly hard during this pandemic to feel in touch with all of that goodness. Sometimes all we can see in the world around us are the people who put themselves before community and give no thought to repairing the harm they cause. And sometimes we have trouble seeing the beauty and peace in nature, and all we see is nature red in tooth and claw. And maybe most hard is when we can't see our own inner luminosity. Sometimes we can only see our own flaws and failings. We can only see the ways that we have hurt others. We can only feel the sense that we are damaged beyond repair. Most often, I think, when we fear rest or avoid it, or when we shy away from stillness, when we want to avoid Advent and waiting, it's because we're out of touch with that goodness that's in the depths of our own souls, that we can't find our connection to that goodness. So how do we find those gifts right now? How do we find gifts in the resting time if we can't find the goodness in us? For those who have a hard time with this over and over and over, I know that that is usually because of a history of trauma. And it takes a lot of healing to be able to be in touch with that on a regular basis. I'm not trying to say that this is ever an easy process, and it's certainly harder to repair those torn parts in us than it is for others. Wayne Muller, this author of the book Sabbath, who is a pastor himself and I think also a therapist, talks a little bit about what he does as a pastor and as a therapist. He says that when people share with me their sorrow and their suffering, at my best, I am merely a faithful companion, watching for the wholeness embedded deep within their fear and confusion. For a time, all they can see or feel is the cold, cutting blade of their terror, the ache of their despair, the burning of their sadness. My work, he says, is to be good company, to be a faithful companion, to allow them to lean for a little while on my unshakable belief in their inner fire. Faithful companioning, being good company. This can be done by somebody who's in a helping profession, like a pastor or a therapist. It happens all the time in recovery and 12-step communities. It happens with friends or family members. Most dogs are good at being faithful companions. Some cats are good at being faithful companions. Those who believe in a higher power often find that God is a good, faithful companion. And sometimes the best that we can do is just use our own imagination to find someone who can companion us like this. So I want to invite us to take a moment right now to think about who has companioned you at some point in your life when you lost touch of your own goodness. Who has been someone who has been there and had an unshakable belief in your inner fire? Just take a moment to think of who that person has been at some point in your life, and maybe type their name in the chat if you'd like. Selena and Logan and Garnet, my grandmother, Jessie, Julia, my dad, Elaine, Mia, my sister, my friend, my mother, Sarah, my wife, Grandpa, Rain Man the dog, Sue, a former pastor, Mom, my mother, my sister, my parents. Sometimes it was an early teacher for us, sometimes a family member. But I think almost all of us have had at least one person who has been that faithful companion to us when we needed it most, that person who unshakably knew our own goodness, even when we didn't. And so I would invite you, if you are struggling with your own inner goodness, not necessarily if you don't believe it, because I think most of us have some kind of brain knowledge that it's maybe there, but if you can't feel it, if you're struggling to be grounded in it, I invite you to take some time with those people, whether they're an actual person who's in your life right now who you can call or talk to. Maybe they're sitting in the same room with you. If it's a dog, they are just always ready at all times. If you have one of those cats who are good at it, they may not always be ready, but they will be ready on their own time, and then they'll be there for you. Or maybe you just need to connect with this person or dog in your memory. Or maybe you're looking for connection with God in meditation or prayer in your own imagination. Wayne Muller writes, eventually, in our own time, eventually, our bodies open and we begin to feel and taste the possibility of that wholeness for ourselves again. The fundamental goodness always waits for us to discover it, even if we only gather together patiently and listen a short amount of time. Eventually, we can all be in touch with our inner fire again, especially if we have a faithful companion who can hold it for us for a while. I think one of the other gifts of this companioning is that even when we can't see it in ourselves, even when we really struggle to find it in someone else, that we can be that faithful companion to someone else. I think even when we are most out of touch with our inner goodness, almost all of us can be in touch with at least somebody else's inner goodness. Again, pick a cat or dog if you are really wrestling with humanity right now, but there is inner goodness that all of us can be in touch with in another. So if all else fails, try faithfully companioning someone else. And you might find, as many of us in helping professions, many of us in recovery communities, many of us who are simply friends or loved ones, know that when we hold the truth of goodness for someone else, we unlock some of the mysteries of our own hearts. It helps us to heal some of the tears of trauma in our own lives. So, my friends, I hope this Advent time, this time of waiting, can also be a time of spiritual preparation for you, even just a small thread of spiritual preparation, if that's all you can muster. I hope this can be a time of faithful companioning for you, whether that is finding someone to be with you or being that for someone else. The greatest gift we can give to ourselves and to each other and to the world is this companioning. It's this witnessing of wholeness, especially in the difficult times. So if you leave this service with nothing else, leave it with this, that even in the waiting times, even in the deepening darkness, when sometimes we can only feel fear, you are filled with a holy luminosity, and you are held by a love that will never let you go. Even if you can't see it today, know that there is someone here. There's someone here right now who sees it in you. Even if you have your camera off, we see it in you because it has been seen in us. I want to close with a blessing for the dark, which is written by my colleague, Reverend Laurel Gray. She writes, "When the facade of your so-called worth crumbles, when you find yourself lost in the dark, I hope you take your time. I hope you listen for the sound of snow. Try to taste the sun as it casts sharp shadows over you. Remember, there is space here. Your body still knows how to breathe, how to heal, how to recall your wholeness. When the facade of your so-called worth crumbles, I hope you tell the truth about the wreckage, at least to yourself. And maybe when the time comes, to someone else. I hope you dig deep enough into your faith that you can find fertile ground beneath the rubble of what was never enough. That immaculate lie of conditional love, I hope you let it fall. For you have always been made of star sparks and darkness, a being held in balance, born of the very mystery of life. When the facade of your so-called worth crumbles, when you find yourself lost in the dark, I hope you let it wash over you. I hope you remember parts of yourself you didn't know were lost. I hope you welcome them home amidst that echoing silence in that still open place. I hope you plant yourself beneath that rubble and wait for spring, for the lavender twilight to remind you of the peace you found in the dark. May it be so, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.